The ocean sunfish. There's a decent chance you've shared the water with one of these and never realized it, because this 2,000-pound disc likes to drift right near the surface where people swim. It's the heaviest bony fish alive, and it looks like someone designed a normal fish, then sawed off everything behind the head and called it a day. Bold. It cruises the open ocean eating jellyfish, diving thousands of feet down and back up through the day. But the truly wild part is what one female can do in a single season. She can carry over 300 million eggs. That's the most of any animal with a backbone ever recorded. Line them up and you'd have roughly one egg for every single person in the United States, from one fish. And almost none of them will make it. Despite its reputation as the laziest, most useless fish in the sea, it's an active predator, working the entire water column. Of those 300 million, maybe one reaches adulthood. One. That's the whole strategy. Buy every ticket and hope. 300 million kids, and if 2 of them survive, she's had a spectacular year. The Giant Sea Hare. In a tide pool, this thing looks like a blob you'd step over without a second thought. Soft and slow and completely harmless. And it really is harmless. What it leaves behind in the shallows, though, is one of the strangest things in the whole ocean. This is a sea slug that grows to a couple of pounds, and it's a hermaphrodite, so it mates in tangled chains of several animals at once, everybody playing both roles. When it lays eggs, they come out in long yellow-green strands that look exactly like wet spaghetti. One egg mass can hold up to 80 million eggs. Scientists once unspooled a single strand in a lab, and it ran 1/3 of a mile, longer than 5 football fields laid end to end, all of it packed with those 80 million eggs. Being both sexes at once means basically every encounter is a chance to breed, which is how something this slow and this defenseless becomes a full-time egg factory. It spends its entire life as the least threatening animal in the sea, and it still outbreeds creatures 1,000 times its size. The oyster. You've probably tipped one of these back with a squeeze of lemon and never once thought of it as an animal, let alone one of the most explosive breeders in the entire sea. Here's the part nobody mentions at the raw bar. An oyster starts life as a male, then later switches over and spends the rest of it as a female. And once it makes that switch, the numbers get ridiculous. A single spawn can be 20 million eggs. Over a full season, one female can push out more than 100 million, broadcasting them straight into the current. It does all of this while cemented to one rock, filtering up to 50 gallons of water a day, never moving an inch to find a mate. Instead, oysters read the water temperature and each other's chemical signals, and all let go at the same instant, filling the water with eggs and sperm together. An animal with no legs, no eyes, and not a single mate in reach still pulls off one of the most explosive reproductive runs in the ocean. If you're enjoying creatures like this, I post new animal deep dives all the time, and subscribing really helps. Thanks. The Atlantic bluefin tuna. This is the fish behind the most expensive sushi on the planet, a single one selling at auction for more than most cars, and the same body that makes it that valuable is also built to flood the ocean with eggs. A big bluefin tops 1,000 pounds and 10 feet. It's warm-blooded, and it can hit better than 40 miles an hour, crossing entire oceans just to spawn. When a large female does, she releases up to 10 million eggs in a season, scattered into open water with exactly zero protection. Think about that. 1,000-pound predator, producing eggs each the size of a pinhead, 10 million of them, and it guards not a single one. It's the same brutal lottery playing out again. Millions of tickets bought, so only a handful ever cash. These fish were hammered by overfishing for decades, and while careful management has them recovering now, they remain a hard cautionary tale. The most expensive fish in the world treats its own children like loose change tossed into the sea. The Beluga Sturgeon. The eggs inside this fish sell for thousands of dollars a pound, which means people have wanted what's in its belly for centuries without ever really thinking about the animal carrying it. And it's worth thinking about, because this thing is older than almost anything you can name. The beluga sturgeon is a living fossil, one of the largest freshwater fish on Earth at over 15 feet and a couple thousand pounds, running on a body plan that has existed for more than 200 million years. It shared rivers with the dinosaurs, then outlasted them by 65 million years, and it still bets everything on the same old trick: millions of eggs released at once. A single large female can carry anywhere from several hundred thousand to more than 7 million eggs. It waited out every mass extinction the planet could throw at it with one plan: grow slowly, then release an overwhelming flood, and it never once needed a better idea. It survived every apocalypse Earth had to offer, and its reward is being famous for the snack we make out of its eggs. To an animal like this, offspring aren't children, they're currency, spent by the million and never counted. The Crown-of-thorns Starfish. This is the animal that eats coral reefs alive, and a big part of why it's so hard to stop is buried in how it breeds and how stubbornly it refuses to die. For years, people who found one did the obvious thing: they cut it in half. Turns out that was exactly the wrong move, because a severed arm or a chopped piece can regrow into a whole new starfish, so early control efforts sometimes just made more of them. It's a bristling pincushion with up to 21 arms, every one of them covered in venomous spines, and it feeds by pushing its own stomach out through its mouth and onto the coral. As for eggs, a big female is a machine. A medium one makes a couple million. A large one, 65 million. And the biggest, over 100 million eggs in a single season, the most ever recorded for any starfish on Earth. Flooding the water with that many larvae is exactly how one population boom can blanket an entire reef. You can stab it, poison it, or cut it clean in half. And sometimes all you've done is introduce it to itself. Twice. The sea urchin. That bright orange paste served in sushi restaurants. The stuff people pay a premium for comes straight out of this spiky little ball, and the animal making it is one of the oldest and simplest breeders in the ocean. Here's what gets me. An urchin has no brain at all, and nothing you'd really call eyes, and yet it pulls off a coordinated spawning event with total strangers scattered across the seafloor. It's basically a walking pincushion, creeping along on hundreds of tiny tube feet, scraping algae with a 5-toothed mouth on its underside. That prized orange part, by the way, is literally its reproductive organs. When a female spawns, she can release several million eggs at once. Several million. From a body the size of your fist. Pile those eggs up, and they bury the animal that made them. And every single one drifts off alone. No shell, no parent, no chance beyond pure luck. With no brain to run the show, urchins go on chemical cues in the water, one release setting off the next, until a whole stretch of seafloor lets go together. No brain, no eyes, no plan. And it still coordinates mass reproduction better than most group chats can pick a restaurant. The giant clam. For generations, sailors swore these things lay in wait on the seafloor, clamping down on a diver's leg and holding them under until they drowned, which made everyone miss the far stranger truth. This animal can weigh as much as 3 grown men, over 4 feet across and 500 pounds, and it can live more than a century, farming algae inside its own flesh for food. It's a hermaphrodite too, releasing eggs and sperm in timed bursts, and when it releases eggs, the number is staggering. A single giant clam can put out around 500 million eggs in one spawning event. 500 million from one animal. That's more human beings than are alive in all of North America, coming out of a single clam on a single patch of reef. Being both sexes and sinking to the tides and the moon lets it blanket the water so thickly that even terrible odds still land a few survivors. 500 million tickets from one animal, and the ocean still keeps almost every one. The old claim that these clams drown divers just doesn't hold up. There's no verified case of a giant clam ever killing anyone, and they close far too slowly to trap anything that can swim. For a creature once blamed for dragging divers to their deaths, its real trick is quietly seeding a reef with 500 million eggs, and closing back up like nothing happened. The Atlantic Cod. This is the fish that fed empires, built entire coastal towns, and sat at the center of one of the hardest lessons the ocean ever taught us: For centuries, people were absolutely certain a fish this fertile could never run out. The numbers made it seem impossible. A big female cod releases her eggs in batches over several weeks, and across a single spawning season, she can put out up to 9 million of them, floating free near the surface. 9 million eggs from one fish. To put that in perspective, most parents lose it over a single teenager. That's more potential offspring in one season than most animals produce in 1,000 lifetimes. So many that people were sure, generation after generation, that she could never be fished out. They were wrong. Decades of heavy fishing collapsed the great cod stocks, and recovery has been painfully slow. Proof that even 9 million eggs can't outrun a fleet of trawlers. Those floating eggs ride the currents to nursery waters, spreading the bet across time and tide instead of one fragile spot. 9 million eggs a year sounds unbeatable, right up until you meet the one predator that counts them faster than she can lay them. Down here, care is a luxury nobody can afford. The ocean doesn't reward the gentle parent. It rewards the one who floods the water and walks away. The sea scallop. You've eaten the exact muscle that lets this animal do something no oyster or clam can pull off, and you almost certainly never knew it was looking right back at you the whole time, because lining the rim of that familiar fan-shaped shell is a row of up to 200 tiny blue eyes. 200! Each one works a bit like a little mirror, a living telescope focusing light, and they all belong to an animal that releases hundreds of millions of eggs at a time. Those eyes catch motion and shadow, which matters because a scallop can actually swim, clapping its shell together to jet away from anything that comes for it. The part you order off the menu is the big adductor muscle that powers that clap. Meanwhile, the rest of it is broadcasting eggs into the current by the 100 million. So here's the final tally. It has 200 eyes, it can swim, and it still somehow ends up the calmest thing on the entire plate. The coral. Everything you picture when you picture a reef. The color, the branching shapes, the living rock itself is actually millions of tiny animals called polyps, packed together and building the biggest living structures on the planet. Most people assume coral is a plant or some kind of colorful rock. It's neither. It's an animal, a whole colony of them. And once a year, they do something in perfect unison that scientists still find almost impossible to fully explain. With no brain, no eyes, and no way to see each other, entire coral colonies release on the exact same night. A few nights after a full moon, a reef will spawn all at once, sending up so many little egg and sperm bundles that the water turns into what David Attenborough called an underwater snowstorm. One colony puts out millions of bundles. A whole reef puts out trillions. All in the same few hours, on the same night. How do they manage it? They read the water temperature, the length of the day, and above all, the moon. Its light and its pull, timing the release so every colony lets go into the same water at the same instant. The whole reef buys in on one night. Every colony all at once. The single biggest lottery draw on the planet. And the ocean, as always, keeps the change. A brainless little animal checks the calendar, waits for the full moon, and throws the largest coordinated party on Earth, without a single one of them ever seeing another. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.